Okay, everybody, we got Bob.
Before we start, I just want to make a couple comments. The execs has been through a really rough time. I mean, I've been in the group for 40 years, and the last couple months have probably been the roughest I've had in the group. And part of today's presentation is to remind ourselves why we're execs. We hope it's fun. We hope you have a good time. If you don't, I've instructed them to lock the doors because I need an audience. But before we start, can we just have, I need people clapping and stuff. Can I have a round?
I'm Bob Sommers. I'm a tax attorney in San Francisco. Not really. I'm his avatar. But welcome to Boomer Bob's Tax Cafe and Coffee Bar, where we drink lattes and talk about tax. Today, I have the great honor and privilege of introducing the guest speaker for today's San Francisco Executives Association presentation, who will speak on the new tax bill and how it will affect your personal taxes, investment and business decisions, and your estate planning. So without further ado, let's welcome the one, the only, and the self-proclaimed greatest tax attorney in the world, Bob Sommers. Yay!
Tax profit! Tax profit! Tax profit!
Okay, enough already. I got a presentation to do. We're going to be talking about, it's the one big, beautiful tax act, and we're trying to think, is that OBA or OBA? But I like to think it is the CPA and Tax Attorneys Full Employment Act for 2025, because there's a lot of stuff in this. Before we start, I just want to give you an overview of what's going on in the tax world so that you can understand what these new tax laws and provisions are supposed to be accomplishing, rather than just jump in and say, the exemption for this is this, all that kind of stuff. So, in order to understand what's happening, I have two slides. Okay, this is slide number one. I went and wanted to figure out what the adjusted gross income was per income group from 1975 to 2025, but the data wasn't there. I had to go to 2022. So this is 47 years. This is 1975, this is 2022. The top 1% of people filing tax returns, their percentage of adjusted gross income went up from about 9% to more than 23%. The bottom 50% went from 20% to about 12%. So what you have was a hollowing out, if you can see these 75 versus 2022. There's been a hollowing out of the middle class. 50% of the population is making an average of $40,000 a year that file returns. The top 1% average is 3.3 million. I looked up the top 1/10 of 1%. They're making about 12 million a year. So things are really skewed where these folks here, the top 5% gross income has gone up over the past 47 years, and everybody else, I don't know what this is, but everybody else has gone down. Okay.
Those pesky billionaires, look at them hoarding all the money. This proves I'm right. As I always say, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. Promise enough people free fish and I win the election.
Let's go to slide number 2. Okay, so here we are. 1975, the top 1% paid in taxes about 18%. In 2022, they paid 40% of the taxes. The top 10% went from 30 to about 32. So here, 72% of all taxes paid are in the top 10% of taxpayers. Down here, the amount of taxes paid dropped from about 8% to 2%.
And this is, again, the bottom 50% of taxpayers, which means we have 50% of people living in our country that aren't really participating in the economy, earning money, paying taxes. And these are your customers. These are the people who need to buy your goods and services. And so there's really no debate about this, that things have been skewed this way. The question is, how do we fix it or how do we address it? You know, I do have a warning. Nobody's been able to figure out how to do this or address it or fix it. But this is what the new law, when we think about this, and I'm going to show you what the new law is trying to accomplish. So, boring. Boring. No one wants to hear a blowhard tax attorney like you pontificate about the tax law. People come to Polio's to eat. Don't you get it? Anyway, after lunch, they feel like sleeping. And because they probably don't have a sleeping pill, I just guess they're going to have to listen to you. So people out there, just snore off. Okay, so what's going on is the new tax law really benefits as far as deductions and things. 98% of the taxpayers, the top 2% have been excluded from tax deductions and things because the effort is to give breaks to working people and others, tax breaks. And so, for instance, we now have no tax on tips and no tax on overtime in certain categories. For a single person, tips they can deduct up to $25,000 and $12,500 in overtime. These stack. That means a single taxpayer making $150,000 a year can, if they get both of these categories, can deduct $37,500. For a joint taxpayers, they can deduct up to $50,000, and their phase out is at $300,000. A $300,000 reaches into kind of the upper middle class, and I would say probably the top, around 90% of taxpayers would cover that. That's pretty generous. When I first saw this, I said, geez, you know, a single person, if they earn $75 an hour and work 2,000 hours a year, you know, it's $150,000. So these, to me, it's very high. I mean, I thought this benefit would hit people between making $15 to $40 an hour, but it's much higher than that. Okay, now I'm going to get in and show you the SALT stuff. Okay, so moving on, boring or not, here is the SALT deduction caps. The SALT is the state and local income tax. These have been raised, and it's pretty interesting because the law's messed up because it gives the same breaks to a single person as it does to married filing jointly. They get the same phase outs at $500,000, and when it's completely phased out at $600,000, your cap goes back down to the old rate, which was $10,000 per year. Okay? So, what does that mean? Well, let's take an example. If you got a couple, each of them earn $325,000 a year, or $650,000. They want to buy a house. If they buy a house, if they get married and they buy a house and file jointly, they get a $10,000 deduction because their income is over the $600,000 phase out, okay? But if they decide not to get married and buy the house together, say as tenants in common, each of them gets a $40,000 deduction. So the difference there is $70,000. Now, that couldn't have been what they meant, but that's what the law says. And in the old days, we used to have a corrections act where they correct this, but since these days nobody's ever wrong about anything, I think that'll probably stick in the law. Okay, so we talk about the SALT deduction going up to $40,000. Well, on the one hand, you have that, but what else is happening is the standard deduction is going up as well. And it's almost approaching what the SALT deduction would be. The standard deduction is, everyone gets this to get the SALT deduction, you have to itemize on your tax return your deductions. And so, what this is saying, if you're joint married, the deduction here is about $34,000, a little bit more, for a joint filer. Now I wanted this one. Yeah, it's about $34,000 if you're over 65 and filing jointly. If you're under that, it's $31,500. Now, what I think is interesting here is there is a senior bonus deduction of $6,000 and $12,000 on top of that. So these reach over what the SALT deduction would be. And what you like about, or I think is interesting about this is, you know, the seniors, they have all the wealth, right? They're, you know, the generational stuff. I've done programs on that. But this is only geared towards seniors who make $75,000 for single or $150,000 for joint. So it's making sure that the seniors who are getting this break are in the lower percentages of taxpayers. Okay? All right, so we've talked about some of the tax breaks for workers. How does this bill help with just redistributing the money to others? It doesn't tax the rich and have government give it to the poor, so to speak. It's not a Robin Hood thing. What this bill does is it says, okay, you in the top 5 and top 1%, we want to entice you into investments we want you to make. And one of those enticements is what's called qualified opportunity zones. Those are zones of low income or designated properties throughout the country. It's a map. And if you invest in those, that's a qualified opportunity zone. For instance, Hunters Point, Candlestick Park, those areas fall within this. But interestingly, on the East Bay, and I really don't understand this, but Jack London Square falls into it. And practically all the property, if you're familiar with the East Bay, from Lake Merritt to the airport, that's is in qualified opportunity zones. Now, there's some really nice properties there, and there's things. So it's not hard to find a property that will fit within this. Okay, so there weren't too many changes between the old law and the new law, but I want to just show you how it works. It's interesting. If you compare it to a 1031 exchange, it's kind of a answer for 1031 exchange for those who aren't exchanging properties. Let's say you have stock you bought for $500,000 and it's now worth $1 million. You sell this stock. You have a $500,000 gain. All you have to do is invest that $500,000 gain into a qualified opportunity zone. You can take the basis part and just put that in your pocket. Okay, so you owe tax on $500,000. Let's assume it's a 20% federal rate. That's $100,000. Well, you don't pay that tax until 5 years later, and then you only pay 90% of that tax. That's a break you get. So in year 5, instead of paying $100,000, you pay $90,000. Okay? Now you hold on to that property from year 5 to year 10. All the gain on that property is tax-free. You never pay tax on anything. They did put this exception, which I don't understand. That if you hold it for more than 30 years, anything over 30 years will be taxable again. But I don't see why you hold it over 30 years. So that's a pretty remarkable tax break. But again, it's to try to develop areas that are undeveloped within the country, and instead of having the government do it, they're letting people who want private people to invest in it. So what's the downside? Well, you're investing in an opportunity zone. If it were a great investment, they wouldn't need these laws. So there's a risk. Although when you look at the map, there's places that are, to me, indistinguishable from any others. I mean, Jack London Square is gorgeous. And some of the waterfront properties along there, the East Bay, are just fine. There are developments in there and everything. So that's one project. Next one. Okay, I guess I missed the other. The other big advantage is what's called it's qualified stock. There's certain stock that if just basically for startups, I mean, that's the approach. Where you invest money in a startup or any new company, and you hold your stock, it's got to be a C corporation, for 5 years, and there's liquidity then, it's sold or whatever. The first $15 million is tax-free to you, federally tax-free to you. I know secondhand some people who do this, and to me, it's like, you know, going to the gold country with trying to pan for gold. They may interview 20 companies, decide to invest in one, and then want to have a portfolio of 50 in order to hit one company that's big. So it's, instead of the government putting money out there and trying to pick winners and losers, this bill has the private sector do it with these kinds of incentives. Okay, next slide. All right,
No, go back.
yeah, okay, so I want to talk about the state and gifts, because here's where really the people who are worth, say, between 30 to 100 million really get a break. Now, the law really hasn't changed much, it just continued. Now the permanent exemption is 15 million per person or 30 million per couple. That is going to be indexed annually. The tax is at 40% over that. But just to give you an example of how it works, with some clever estate planning and some tricks. I mean, sophisticated estate planning that we do that's totally proper. Next slide. Okay, let's imagine we have an estate worth $80 million. Well, they got some really good advice, and they did a lot of structuring of their investments, so they hold family limited partnerships and other things. And so because of that, we're able to discount the interest by 35%. It's called a fractional interest deduction. Now their estate's only worth $52 million only. They take their $30 million exemptions, and they have a taxable estate of $22 million. Well, 40% of that's only $8.8 million. But do they really pay $8.8 million? Well, if they were properly advised years ago, they probably have what's called a second to die life insurance trust. And because they have that, it maybe have $10 million when they die, and that goes to pay the estate tax, and let's say it costs them $2 million for this insurance way back when, there's actually money left over to help reimburse that. So, has anyone got any comments on that?
Who cares? $80 million estates? Indeed. Do you really think if someone has that kind of money, they'd be sitting here listening to you? Probably not, unless you're someone like Hugh Tuck, or maybe Phil Wiseman. Who? Phil Wiseman? Yeah, Phil Wiseman. Take it away, Phil.
Put a little rhythm to this, and it goes like this. Ding, ding, ding. Hello!
Hello.
Hello!
Hello.
And welcome to the Uncle Phil Show.
Okay, I give up. You win. All right, guys, why don't you come out here and take a bow? Hey, what about me? Don't I count? Let's give it up for the brains behind this operation, the AI creator himself, Jaime Martinez.
Good afternoon, execs, and thank you.
And because everyone needs a banker, let's give a big round of applause to our own banker, Mary Wong. Because everyone needs a reverse mortgage broker. A what? All right, enough already. I think it's time to end this.